Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS provides relief for victims of September wildfires in California. October 15th deadline. Other dates extended to January 15th. IR 2020-237, October 19th, 2020, Washington. Victims of the California wildfires that began on September 4th now have until January 15th, 2021 to file various individual and business tax returns and make tax payments, the Internal Revenue Service announced today. Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. IRS provides relief for victims of September wildfires in California. October 15th deadline. Other dates extended to January 15th. IR 2020-237, October 19, 2020, Washington. Victims of the California wildfires that began on September 4th now have until January 15th to file various individual and business tax returns and make tax payments, the Internal Revenue Service announced today. The IRS is offering relief to any area designated by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, FEMA. There's a link to FEMA here, as qualifying for individual assistance. Currently, this includes Fresno, Los Angeles, Madera, Mendocino, San Bernardino, San Diego, Siskiyou counties in California, but taxpayers in localities added later to the disaster area will automatically receive the same filing and payment relief. The current list of eligible localities is always available on the disaster relief page on IRS.gov. There's a link to the disaster relief page here. There'll be a link to this in the description so you can check that out for yourself. This relief is separate from that provided for the California wildfires that began on August 14th. See the agency's August 26th announcement for details. There's a link to that August 26th announcement. The tax relief postpones various tax filing and payment deadlines that occurred starting September 4th, 2020. As a result, affected individuals and businesses will have until January 15th, 2021 to file returns and pay any taxes that were originally due during this period. This means individuals who had a valid extension to file their 2019 return due to run out on October 15th, 2020 will now have until January 15th, 2021 to file. So the 2019 tax return, as you will recall, the original due date was extended, but the extension due date was not extended for just the normal taxpayers. It was still on that October 15th. So if you then filed for extension for the individual tax returns for 2019, that would now be due normally in October 15th, 2020, that's the component that they're talking about could be then extended. If you did not file for an extension, then it might not affect you here because the tax return still would have been done unless extension was filed for the 2019 individual tax return. The IRS noted, however, that because tax payments related to these 2019 returns were due on July 15th, 2020, those payments are not eligible for this relief. So that means that there's two things that you're trying to avoid penalties from with regards to the filing. One, you got to have a filing penalties you're trying to avoid. The extension will typically avoid those. This extension applies to the extension on the extension. So you could extend the period if you are on extension for the October filing deadline. However, it doesn't extend the time period in which the payment needs to take place. And the deadline for the payment taking place happened on July 15th, which is before the extension or any problem happened here. So therefore, they're not extending the payment deadline, but only the filing deadline. So the January 15th, 2021 deadline also applies to quarterly estimated income tax payments due on September 15th, 2020, and quarterly payroll and excise tax returns normally due on November 2nd, 2020. It also applies to tax-exempt organizations operating on a calendar year basis that had a valid extension due to run out on November 16th, 2020. Businesses with extensions also have the additional time, including, among others, calendar year corporations with 2019 extensions run out on October 15th, 2020. In addition, penalties on payroll and excise tax deposits due on or after September 4th and before September 21st will be abated as long as the deposits were made by September 21st, 2020. The IRS Disaster Relief page, there's a link to that here, has details on other returns, payments, and tax-related actions qualifying for the additional time. The IRS automatically provides filing and penalty relief to any taxpayer with an IRS address of locale located in the disaster area. Therefore, Taxpayers do not need to contact the agency to get this relief. However, if the affected taxpayer receives a late filing or late payment penalty notice from the IRS that has an original or extended filing, payment, or deposit due date filing within the postponement period, the taxpayer should call the number on the notice to have the penalty abated. In other words, you shouldn't need to do anything because the IRS knows where you are and they're going to apply this by the locality. However, if you get a notice saying that you owe penalties related to this and you know that you should not, so it was an error on the IRS, which they shouldn't make because they have your address, but if that does happen, then you call the notice, the number on the notice, and you should be able to get those penalties abated in the event of that happening. In addition, the IRS will work with any taxpayer who lives outside the disaster area but whose records necessary to meet a deadline occurring during the postponement period are located in the affected area. Taxpayers qualifying for relief who live outside the disaster area need to contact the IRS at 866-562-5227. This also includes taxpayers assisting the relief activities who are affiliated with a recognized government or philanthropic organization. Individuals and businesses in a federally declared disaster area who suffered uninsured or unreimbursed disaster-related losses can choose to claim them on either the return for the year the loss occurred, in this instant 2020, because it would be this year, return normally filed next year, or the return for the prior year, 2019. So you actually have the option there. Be sure to write FEMA, F-E-M-A, declaration number 4569 for the wildfires in California on any return claiming a loss. See Publication 547 for details. There's a link to Publication 547 here. The tax relief is part of a coordinated federal response to the damage caused by the wildfires and is based on local damage assessments by FEMA, F-E-M-A. For information on disaster recovery, visit disasterassistance.gov. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.